Welcome to Universal God Message of Peace, and this is our weekly Abrahamic dialogue, and I am Lee Weissman, and we have here with Lale Tuncer and with Dr. Khalid Khalid Zaheer, and we are in an ongoing conversation about the topic of justice. So last week, I held forth a little bit on the topic of justice, and Dr. Zaheer got to ask me questions. And today, we flip back, and I get to relax a little bit, and I get to listen to Dr. Zaheer. So I'm going to give the platform to Dr. Zaheer, but before we do that, make sure to subscribe, and like the video if you like it, and if you don't like it, don't say anything. Okay, Dr. Zaheer.
Thank you very much. I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. Uh, justice is a very important, deep, and yet complex subject, and it was dealt with by Dr. Weissman, Rabbi Weissman, as well uh, in the last presentation, very ably. Uh, my understanding of justice is that it actually means you give everyone what he or she deserves, that is, their rights. Uh, what is it that an individual deserves, and what is his or her right? In some ways is clear, but in some other ways is subjective. And I think that is why the question of justice sometimes gives us a reason to feel that, as Rabbi Weissman mentioned last time, there could be two ways or more of doing justice, not just one way. The way I see it in the Quran, uh, there is a mention, well, there are more than one passages which mention this fact, but one of them is mentioning quite clearly that God does not just expect us to be just and fair, He also wants us to be benevolent. So the Quran says, "Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan." God commands you to be just and to be benevolent. What it means is that while justice would demand that you get exactly what you deserve from the other, however, it is a good idea that you let go some part of what you deserve voluntarily to help out the other person or to be kind to the other person. And that would make make it more likely that your bonding, your relationship with the other person is going to be uh, at a far deeper level. If you are demanding justice from others and you are giving justice to others, it's fine. I mean, that's the minimum that should be uh, taken and given to others. But benevolence is what makes it this life far more beautiful, attractive. We sacrifice for each other. We are concerned for each other. Uh, what we understand from the divine texts is, probably it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that that is one reason why the divine texts are accepted as divine, is that they inform us most clearly that God is just. Uh, More than anything else, our God is a just God. But we are also informed that He's kind too. Uh, In actual fact, there is a verse of the Quran that mentions that his kindness, it overwhelms, surpasses all other attributes. Now, sometimes we do feel uh, that probably if you are just, you can't be kind. And if you're kind, then uh, you'll have to compromise on justice. So, quite often, the example of kind hearted mother is given that she, because she's kind to her children, she would compromise on principles of justice to make sure that her children are uh, getting the best treatment. Uh, my understanding is that it's not that justice and kindness cannot simultaneously be there, functioning, operating. Uh, the example that comes to my mind is that whereas justice would demand that, for example, God, when it would come to the occasion of accountability, He will make each and every human accountable on the same basis, on the basis of merit. If there is going to be one set of rules for some people and another set of rules for other people, and the two sets of rules are different from each other in leniency or strictness, then it would not be justice. So the same set of rules apply to all humans when the ultimate accountability is done. That's justice. But then what are those rules? Are they strict or are they, you know, lenient? They're not too strict. It seems that God, the kind, the loving, the benevolent, has chosen his criteria for deciding whether people are going to succeed or not. His criteria are light, are lenient, and therefore he is kind while still being fair and just. So the two seemingly conflicting attributes can actually be uh, functional simultaneously without one compromising the other. Uh, my next question is where where is God's justice? I mean, this whole talk of justice looks very attractive, but then when you move out of the books and the discussion, forums and face the real world that we are a part of, you find that the the talk of justice, uh, the great ideal of justice that was being mentioned and clarified, uh, is not there. It's being flouted, and what you find is that we are living in a world of injustice. So how can a religious person justify that he believes in a God who is just, and he's the one who created this world, and he's the one who is running the affairs of this world, and he being just has not apparently has not been able to implement justice in this world? It's a very important question. Uh, and honestly, there's no answer to it. There's just not any answer possible to this very um, fair question, except that there is another life. This life that we are a part of is not good enough to make one feel comfortable with the idea that God is just. And that feeling is very strong. We, all human beings, uh, might differ in our understanding of what justice is slightly, not by a great margin. But that agreement is there, but we don't find it happening. And therefore, it is so very important that we, while believing in a just God, should believe in his or should appreciate, acknowledge, and understand his total, complete plan. This worldly life of ours is only one part of it, which is the trial part of the life of our life. Life being eternal, the next part is going to be the result of that trial. And it is going to be justice unfolded in its pristine, complete, detailed uh, form that's going to be there in the next life. Now, I also find in the Quran mentioned that justice, in order for it to be done, it's important for humans to overcome the obstacles that are there in the way of doing justice. Uh, the Quran urges the reader to ensure that he is behaving in a way that is being a witness of God in implementing justice. Uh, in one passage, Quran mentions that you should do it, even if it goes against your own self interests or the interests of your parents or your relatives. So, one reason why people are unjust is that they they have a feeling that if they are going to be just, it, it's going to it's going to compromise their interests. It's going to go against their interests, the interests of their parents, relatives, friends, nation, their tribe. So they are unjust. It's not that they don't know what is justice, but it's because they know what is just is against their interests, and therefore they refuse to be just. And obviously, I mean, uh, people have, have been given a bright mind, intellect, which can very easily try to defend the case of injustice, uh, despite knowing that what is being presented is absolute rubbish. The other, the other aspect is that there is another obstacle, and this is mentioned in another passage that we have been asked to be champions of justice as witnesses of our Creator. Uh, and the Quran says, let not the enmity of a nation incline you to be unfair. So the other obstacle is my grudge, my enmity, my hatred for somebody. I don't like him. And therefore, I'm not going to decide anything that's going to favor him. So that's the other obstacle. And obviously, in order for somebody to be just and fair, it's important that these obstacles are removed. Uh, and it is precisely for this reason that we find in our present day world, and it's a present uh, development, that it now has been acknowledged that if you are sitting in a position of responsibility where you have to take important decisions, then your role of decision making should not conflict with your self interests. So, The principle of conflict of interest is what is what is recognized as an important principle. Uh, and if somebody has conflict of interest in a certain matter where a decision is to be taken, then the person is expected as a decent human being to withdraw from there, to withdraw from the position of taking decision. Uh, Belief that we religious people have been given to acknowledge, to acquire, uh, is also related to that justice. Uh, we know that what we are doing, what we are saying, what we are thinking, is all in the knowledge of God. And there is a life beyond this life. And we are going to be held accountable uh, for everything that we would do. So this belief is what causes an individual, or should incline an individual to become just and fair more than any other group of people. A religious person should be more just and more fair than those who are not religious. Why? Because a religious person is not just feeling from inside that there should be justice. He also knows that this inclination to be just, this natural feeling, has been given to him by God, who knows what he's doing, and he knows his intentions, motives as well. And on top of that, what he will do is going to be what he will be held accountable for. So if this realization is there in a religious person based on his beliefs, he is expected to be more just than anybody else. But why is it that quite often we find that that's not the case? Uh, the religious people are not necessarily the most fair and just people. And the answer, there could be many answers, but the answer that I know from my religious environment is that uh, there are many religious, what I call crutches, which have been created, invented, that cause an individual to stand on them and feel that despite being unjust and unfair, despite the fact that God knows what He's doing, and there's going to be a hereafter where accountability is going to be held at a level which is going to be absolutely fair. And yet, some, probably many religious people are very unfair, more unfair than many of those people who are not religious. What I find in my environment is there are many reasons, but two are more significant. One is the feeling within the religious person that because I belong to this particular religious group, I have a certain statement creed, which we call kalama. I recite it. Therefore, I'll succeed in the next life. I say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and I'll be given a free entry into the paradise. Now, when you have that understanding, uh, I think you're likely to be more unjust than anybody else because the fear of God and the fear of accountability in the next life, they have been that feeling has been bulldozed, punctured, it's gone because you have a birthright, because you belong to a certain group and you make a statement which gives you a guarantee. So you can't be fair. Likewise, there is this understanding of intercession that I have a relationship with certain pious people, prophets, etc., saints, and they'll rescue me from the accountability process, and therefore do whatever you can. I mean, you are a you're a lucky person. So people turn out to be unjust, extremely unjust, despite them being religious and despite believing in the fact that justice is the basis on which this entire creation is standing on, and the creator is is nothing but just. Uh, Justice is not just to be implemented in decision making, in the court of justice or in the marketplace. Justice, probably first and foremost, is to be implemented in one's opinions, in deciding what opinion are you forming. Uh, and one of the obstacles, a big obstacle in doing justice in one's opinions is prejudice, bias. I I keep listening to something over and over again, and I get biased. And I therefore cannot do justice in forming opinions. Uh, this sadly happens, and it really is a form of injustice, which probably is more prevalent and widespread than most other injustices. I formed an opinion, and I don't care about what your understanding is. Uh, and the reason is that I'm biased. My mind has been so so much brainwashed, indoctrinated that I can't form any other opinion. Now, what is the way out of it? Well, honestly, there's no other way out of it. Like in the case of justice, while deciding, you you need to make sure that your own interests do not impede the process of justice. Your enmity towards somebody else does not stop you from being just. In the case of opinions, uh, this prejudice, bias can only be removed and can only be done gradually, if possible, by an ongoing, constant process of self-criticism, uh, open-mindedness, uh, empathy towards the other point of view. Quite often, and this is my last, I'm on too long in my presentation. The last thing I would want to say is that this, unfortunately, again, religious people are unable to do. I'm not talking about all, many of them, because the religious opinion they have formed through this process of indoctrination is what they describe as their belief. And belief cannot be compromised. So there is no independent critical thinking possible, which is what is essential to be fair and just in forming opinions. Uh, but it's not that it really is a hopeless situation. I mean, God has created humans as extremely capable individuals who can actually be just and fair in all aspects of their life. Probably a very small question I'll answer, and I'll stop my presentation. You know, when I come to these conclusions and I see myself first and people around me, uh, the situation seems to be very gloomy. And I mean, if that's the case, then who would be there to succeed in the eyes of God? If that's what is going to be the level of expectation of Him, that we be absolutely fair even in forming our opinions. Well, what gives comfort is the fact that God is not going to ask for anything that is beyond our capability. He knows our limitations. He knows that we are we are biased. Some part of bias is what is probably unavoidable. So he's going to be not just fair, he's going to be kind as well. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was great.
Thank
Um,
you. That was
really great. Um, so I want to give us both a compliment at the same time. I'm going to give myself a compliment. I'm going to give you a compliment. One of the things that I really like about this conversation of ours is I feel like a lot of religious dialogue um, doesn't get very real, you know, and like this never admits struggle. And one of the things that I like about what we've been doing and what especially what you do is that like we admit struggle. So I have to give us both a compliment for that
You
because
know, you do it quite often. I'm inspired by what you do, honestly.
well, you know, now I had to take all these notes. This is not fair, really. I had to take a lot of notes. So if I was looking down, by the way, I was just taking notes. Um, So first of all, I want to like there was something right in the middle which really struck me, and it's interesting to myself. I have to think carefully to myself, why didn't I talk about it last week? Like you said, where is God's justice? Because as you're right, as soon as you leave the book, right, and you look around you, right, you say to yourself, what God's justice, where exactly? Right? I mean, that the world that we live in is for sure not just. And if you work in a community, you work with people, and if you have a family, if you any situation in human life, you're very aware that there's a lot of injustice. And um, and nobody can say, you know, and the answer you gave is I think the best answer. And that is i- unless you believe that there's a life beyond this, it cannot be. You know, with the example that somebody once gave me was, let's take a person who's a mass murderer. Take, you know, Stalin or Hitler. Okay. So what's the punishment they can receive in this world? They can be killed, right? You can kill them once, right? So they could kill 20 million people and you can only kill them once. So that couldn't possibly be justice. So there's no way that justice could be served in this world. So that is the best answer. Having said that, it's it's a hard answer. I mean, it's a difficult answer to live with, I think. It's a difficult answer to live with, and you know, there's people have a lot of tears over that, and I also have a lot of tears over that. It's not an easy answer. It's not an easy answer. Um, and I loved what you said in the very beginning about God's justice and the idea of our being asked to kind of overcome our sense of justice, right? On the one hand, that's the minimum. It's the minimum, right? The justice we have our, you know, we have what we have a right to, but we shouldn't always be demanding what it is that we have a right to. We have the opportunity to be benevolent, and even God, right? And God is just, right? And his benevolence overcomes his own justice in a certain sense, right? He chooses the benevolence over justice. And that to me is, I think, a very powerful. It's interesting also that I think Judaism and Islam, in contrast to Christianity, are sort of thought of as justice religions, right? Speaking of religions that are kind of fixated on justice. And what I find is that while that is true, because they're both also legalistic in certain respects, while that's true, I think built into the scriptures is this idea of compassion, is this idea of saying, yes, there is justice. Yes, there is justice. And it's really important as a bottom line in all societies. There has to be a bottom line. The bottom line is justice. But then beyond the bottom line, in terms of what we should be doing, right? There's what we can do and there's what we should do. So what we can do is be just. What we should do is to go beyond the justice. Um, and you know, when you talked about this struck me a lot. It talks to me about, it talks about kind of the religious crutches. If we have the right intercessor, right? If we have the right intercessor, if we have the right key, right? We say the right words, we say the magic words, we say, right? We have we have the opinion, right? That you have to have in order to get to heaven. Then I have a free pass, and once I have a free pass, right, I can do whatever I want, right? Because I have the free pass, right? I keep the free pass in my pocket. I pull it out, right? At the end of, hey, here it is, right? I was connected to this such such teacher, right? I have the special word. I said this, okay? I'm in. I don't have to worry about my judgment. And that I think is a very dangerous thought. And it reminded me of a story. So I have to tell you, so I've been waiting to tell somebody this story. So you've been elected. So the story goes that there's a rabbi. His name is Rabbi Mendel Futterfuss. That's his name. And Futterfass. In any case, he was arrested. He was teaching Torah secretly during the Soviet era, and he was sent to a gulag in Siberia. And in the gulag in Siberia, it was forbidden to play cards. Nobody was allowed to play cards. They weren't allowed to do anything. They basically had to just sort of sit there all day, right? They worked and they would come home. They weren't allowed to do anything. So they weren't allowed to play cards. But there was one guy who smuggled in a pack of cards. And they would sit on their bed and they would play cards with each other just to pass the time. Not gambling, they don't have any money. They're in prison. So they play cards. And the guards found out about this, and the guards said, okay, we're going to get these people. And so they would go and they would search for the cards, and they would never find the cards. They would come and they would toss everything, and it was very, very thorough, and they never found the cards. And finally, this rabbi turned to one of the guys and he said, I don't understand. How is it that they never find the cards? I mean, they searched everywhere. Why did they never find the cards? He says, it's very simple. He says, me, I'm an expert pickpocket. Every time they come, every time they come to look for the cards, I take the cards and I put it in their pocket. Right? And they're searching and they're searching and they're searching and they're searching. Says, but nobody ever checks their own pocket. He says, and then before they leave, I take it out of their pocket and keep it. He says, and I think this summarizes a lot of the of why religious people are sometimes so judgmental because nobody checks their own pocket. They're so busy everybody is busy checking everybody else's pockets to see, that they don't check their own. So yes, check your own pocket first. And I think that that's really, if you want to be judgmental on yourself, right? Uh, be judgmental on yourself. You want to be hard on yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up, endlessly. But okay, you want to be a little harder on yourself, go ahead, be a little harder on yourself, but be softer on other people. And instead of worrying about everybody else's injustice, right? They're not doing right, and they're not doing right, and they're not doing right. Then, okay, look at yourself. And I think that really justice demands a lot of self-reflection and to really and when you say it's very interesting, like the demand that we do justice, even if it affects our self-interest, is one of the most difficult demands to fulfill. It is really, really, really hard because we are built in such a way as to protect our self-interest, whether it's our personal self-interest, our family self-interest, our tribal self-interest, our people, our nation, whatever. We have all of those, we have all those things, and to be asked to do something beyond that when so much of our life is concentrated on that is really a big demand, and even to be conscious when we're doing that, right? I mean, it's so interesting how often, even in the legal system, how often judges have to be asked to recuse themselves because they don't realize their self-interest. They don't realize, they don't realize that they have a stake in something. And so we ourselves, again, we have to check our own pockets and we
Yeah.
have to see, listen, what's my stake in this? Why am I, if what kind of prejudice or bias am I bringing to this situation that might cause me, to be unjust? Um, so that's my takeaway from here is that to remember to check my own pockets. And um, it's also interesting you said that we're expected also to be champions of justice. And that's that's a tough one. That's a tough one. It's not just to be just, but to be a champion for justice and to be a witness for the idea of justice in the world. And that's a very big challenge because the world is so unjust. And I don't know exactly how to do that, but if we could figure that one out, that would be good. That's my that's my that's my commentary on the commentary.
Thank
That
you.
was fun. Thank you so, so much. The great comments and absolutely fantastic points you made, Dr. Zaheer. And do you have anything to comment on Rabbi Weissman's comments?
Okay.
Or
I mean, you go ahead. I'll say after you've said.
no, you go ahead first. It's fine.
No, I think the story that he mentioned is absolutely right. I mean, uh, I think what is lacking in us is most certainly self-criticism. We don't check our own pockets and we look at the pockets of others, and that's why uh, injustice goes on and on and on. Um, he pointed out, and rightly so, that it really is difficult, because um, that's what the challenge is. My interest is at stake. Um, I think what needs to be done is that I quite often feel that we need to create an environment. We create an atmosphere where speaking the truth, speaking what is just, doing what is just becomes more acceptable. We praise it. Unfortunately, we are not able to do justice because quite often we fear the consequences. I'm reminded of another very interesting verse in the Quran, a very brief part of it. It says, uh, "Faiza qultum," when you say something, when you speak something, fadilu, be fair. My goodness. So speak what is just and fair. It's not easy,
Mm.
but I think that's what needs to be done. And therefore, probably it's important, as has been said by many wise people, it's better to keep quiet, not to speak, because you start speaking and you speak something unfair, that again is going to be wrong. But a lot of introspection is needed. Over to you, doctor.
Yeah, I agree. And also doing justice to ourselves, sort of doing justice to what we believe, what we truly believe, and what we truly want and desire. First, we have to know that, and that involves, reflecting on ourselves and reflecting on And I guess prayer is a way of, helping ourselves to remember what it is we, want, and talking to our creator and having that relationship. So first, to remember what it is we truly want and what really is truly in our self-interest, like what you said. If we can create an environment where actually justice is praised and valued, and that becomes in our, we realize that that is our true self. If we really are interested in our self interest, if that makes sense, then we would be interested in justice and being fair. And I think what we should all do is probably ask ourselves, what is success? Because the way we choose to live our lives is often based around how we understand success to mean. And if we think that success is, you know, gaining more material wealth or honor or praise and glory and fame and all these things which are temporary in this life, then the way we choose to think, speak, and behave is often shaped by our understanding of success. And I think it's important to be just to our words. So when we do choose to speak, obviously we keep our promises, we fulfill our commitments. That is being just to ourselves as well, and sort of being aligned with that truth. I'm talking about this, but it's so difficult to do, and we all struggle with it. And I really struggle. And what helps me is when I try to remember my creator as much as possible, because it's so easy to forget. And I think that's the thing that mankind, causes. When we forget, that's when we go off that path of justice so easily. And we forget that really what is our self-interest is the interest of other people. When we see ourselves in others and we see others in ourselves and we really feel our oneness, then we are less likely to assume or believe that we are better or more worthy than someone else, because it's that which causes us to, be greedy, be lustful, be, chasing after our temporary desires of this world, like envy and greed and lust and anger, and because it comes from us believing that we're better than someone else, like you mentioned when you said about believing you're chosen and you're special and you're more worthy to get that free ticket than somebody else. And I think that's the start of our downfall. And I guess in the Quran, there's, when it describes the Shaitan and Iblis, when God created Adam and said the angels bow down, and he refused because he thought that he was better. He said, I'm better than him because you made me from fire and you made him from clay. And then he was banished from hell. Like, I think that story sort of sums up the state of humanity sometimes, and it's so important to therefore be humble as much as possible and not assume that we are better than anyone else, just because we're religious or just because this or that. I think God knows best our hearts and everybody's personal struggles, and the more we try to remember our values, what we believe, and stay true to them, then that is being just to ourselves, I believe personally. And it might look different to everybody, it might look different to someone else. Someone might believe that it's actually just to do something that appears to be evil, but they might be being more just than somebody who appears to be doing good. But that good person might not be truly aligned with their justice, if that makes sense. Yeah. But thank you so much. I think that was really moving and so inspiring, both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. God bless you both, and may we all be guided to path of justice and mercy. One other thing, I just wanted to say is, perhaps we could see that God's justice is his mercy, and that his mercy is his justice, and that his mercy works through his justice, because where if as you said, if God was treated some people differently to others, so for all those who do strive for goodness and righteousness in this world and sacrifice to help other people, where's the justice if those people do not get treated in the same way that they treated others? They might be suffering in this world in order to achieve that righteousness. So God's mercy, he will be merciful to those individuals who strive and sacrifice their wealth and their efforts and their time in order to help other people. And as you said as well, the mother, like as a mother, I know that I have to sometimes force myself to get angry with my kids. Not angry, but appear to be cross and strict and stern. They know that I'm a big softie, but I can't let them get away with everything because I know it's not good for them. So sometimes you have to be, strict. And I'm not saying obviously God is beyond our understanding and the way he works, but from a mother's perspective, I can say that however much I love my kids, I have to sometimes punish them because I love them. So I think it's easy to look at the world and the way that it looks like it is unjust. And maybe it's just that our perception of it is not clear. But I believe personally that God is maintaining everything in justice, and we might not perceive it and understand it. But I guess that's part of the test, isn't it? Is to surrender to an understanding that's beyond our understanding, and just be patient as much as possible, and try our best really, and struggle together. So yeah, anyway, there we go. I'm talking too much. Thank you so much. God bless
Thank
you,
you.
and
Thank
looking
you very much. Thank you.
Islam.
See you. Thank you very
Yes.
much.